My name is Thomas Lindsay, and I'm Senior Counsel for the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. So the last side of the box is corporate constitutional personhood rights, or the concept that corporations are persons under the law and therefore can use the Bill of Rights protections contained within the federal and state constitutions. So people ask, what are these corporate personhood rights? How can a corporation be a person? Well, starting in the 1800s, the courts, culminating with the U.S. Supreme Court in 1886, began conferring certain constitutional rights that we normally think of as only being possessed by people, real, natural human beings, have been conferred on the corporate form. So the corporation having, in essence, Bill of Rights protections. So Walmart having First Amendment free speech rights and Fourth Amendment protections against warrantless searches for corporations, and the whole gamut of Bill of Rights protections that normally would belong only to human people have been given to corporations. People ask, what's the history of this? How far back does it go? It goes way back to Roman times, when Rome recognized ecclesiastical corporations and other corporations as having perpetual life, not just existing as long as the people that created it, but having perpetual life and certain rights to own property and those types of things. It morphed through English common law, which is the platform for where we get our U.S. constitutional law, that corporations had certain rights in England. Again, shipping companies, ecclesiastical or church corporations. So it has a long pedigreed history. And a lot of people argue that corporate constitutional rights are somehow an aberration or an exception, but they're kind of hard-baked into our constitutional and legal history, and that history goes back quite a ways. So how does it work? Why are corporate constitutional rights relevant to the work? Well, they're relevant because corporations can file lawsuits alleging that you've violated their corporate constitutional rights. And people run into it the most when they attempt to pass laws at the local level, and corporations come in and file a lawsuit contending that you've violated their corporate constitutional rights. So we're all familiar with Citizens United, federal campaign finance laws being struck down because corporations asserted their right to free speech, and campaign finance regulations is a violation of that right. There's a great case that came out of Vermont where the state of Vermont attempted to force dairy producers to label their products that had bovine growth hormone in it, the artificial additive that European countries have banned from dairy production. Corporation took Vermont to court, federal court, contended that the requirement to label their products that contained this artificial BGH product was a violation of their First Amendment right not to speak. So the First Amendment has rights to speak in it, free speech, but also has rights not to be forced to speak. And a federal judge overturned the Vermont law on the basis of that right of a corporation not to be forced to speak, to saying that they have artificial BGH in their product. The place where we run into the most is something called takings. Under the 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, corporations can't have property taken without just compensation. So if you're going to pass a law that results in a lessening of value for a corporation, that the corporation can sue you for the value that you've cost them. This happens most frequently with permits. So the federal or state government will issue a permit to a corporation. Upon issuance, that permit becomes property of the corporation. So if you're passing a law to ban fracking or to prohibit factory farms in your community, and that has an impact on a permit that's been issued to a corporation to actually put those projects in, you can be sued for the value lost as a result of that local law that you've passed and its impact on that permit that's been issued to the corporation. The part of it that most folks do not know about in terms of a corporation suing you over these local laws and contending that you violate their corporate constitutional rights is that they can sue the municipality, your city, town, village, or county for damages. So if you violate the corporation's civil rights, you can not only have your law overturned, but you can also be liable for monetary damages to the corporation for the loss of value that they've incurred. So if we think about a ban on fracking, you're depriving the corporation of access to their natural gas. by banning them from fracking for that natural gas, and can be held liable for the value of the natural gas that you've stopped them from taking pursuant to their state or federal permit. So this is why cities, towns, villages, and counties regularly knuckle under to corporations that are suing them, because they can't possibly afford to pay the damages if there's a ruling against them. And the biggest question that we get asked is, well, how do you override these corporate constitutional personhood rights, because they're recognized within the federal Constitution? And the answer is that we, the people, have a constitutional right of local self-government to make rules for ourselves in our communities for quality of life and health, safety, and welfare, and protecting ecosystems and the natural environment. And at some point, those constitutional rights clash. The corporate constitutional right claim to being a person, and that you can't take action that may interfere with the exercise of those corporate constitutional rights, and the rights of people to govern their own communities. There's a clash that happens there. And courts have to begin to ask themselves which ones are legitimate rights and which ones aren't. One belongs to property, so corporations in the form of property who have claimed certain constitutional rights, and the other is the constitutional right of local self-governance, which inheres to people living within that community. And eventually, that right of local self-governance has to reign superior over those claimed corporate constitutional rights that corporations have by virtue of being property and then claiming themselves as persons. A lot of people think that rights come with responsibilities, but with corporations that's not true. That the rights come as rights, but not with responsibilities. One of those responsibilities used to be the corporate death penalty, which was exercised quite a bit during the 1800s to put corporations out of existence, but has since been scaled back almost to the point of being meaningless by state legislatures essentially taking those provisions out of their corporate codes, which has been an activity happening over the past 100 years or so to eliminate that remedy. And other states have limited it just to the Attorney General's office that can bring those corporate death penalty cases, whereas it used to be that individual people or communities could bring those, but now only the Attorney General can in certain states. So it's been very limited in terms of scope.